And one thing I've always wanted is to buy a house. Well, me and almost the entire population. In this video, we'll explore my options and the process of buying a house in Spain, including how to find a property. What opportunities do banks offer you? What assistance, mortgages, so you can buy it? So come with me. Today I woke up thinking, how could I go about buying a house in Spain? And well, yes, one of my plans at some point is to buy a house. Well, everyone wants to buy a house at some point, and I would love for it to be right here in Galicia. I feel very happy here, quite integrated. I wouldn't want to move. I'll be honest, when I first got to Spain, I had some savings from money I'd earned. Thanks to YouTube and social media from Cuba, which I ultimately hadn't used while in Cuba. I saved everything to come here and have some savings when I arrived. My friend, as you know, helped me come to Spain. She bought a house in a village here in Galicia, and actually she recommended to me that I should buy a house. Maybe I wouldn't even need a big down payment because here banks can give you mortgages of up to 90%. But of course, at that time, first of all, I didn't have any papers. I didn't have a work history. It was impossible for them to give me a mortgage for a house. Impossible. I wasn't sure either. I said, I don't know, since I'm not convinced about living here. I need to try different places in Spain so I can know where I'm going to stay and live. When you buy a house, it's usually to stay long term, though you can always sell, move, or rent it. But I said, no, I don't think so yet. Before we keep talking, let's make coffee. Just look at me. I just woke up. And already thinking about such deep topics as how to buy a house in Spain. I could buy myself a coffee maker, one of those fancy ones, but you know what? I prefer this one. I don't know, I feel like this coffee tastes more like real coffee. And it's pretty worn out. My little coffee maker is the first one I bought after arriving in Spain, and I'm fond of it. I should be a bit more creative with my breakfast. I always have the same thing for breakfast, a coffee with milk and toast. I do change up the toast though. Here is Philly. Well, so I've been thinking about it for a few days now, because now I really have considered it, and I say, well, if one day I could buy a house or an apartment or whatever, although I would be more excited about a house, but I would need to have a car for that. First, I'd love it to be here in Galicia. So I thought, what do I need to do to buy a house or apartment? I don't know what might happen in the future here in Galicia. In fact, each autonomous community has taxes, and they have different conditions. For example, certain taxes. There are things you have to pay for that I didn't even know about. I thought it was just taking the money to the house and that's it, or if the bank gives you the loan, like here, take the money and that's it. But aren't there many other things? Lots of paperwork, various fees, and different taxes. And things that, when I started to look into it, I said, this is more complicated. Buying a house is more complicated than you think. That's not easy. This isn't like buying clothes, it's more significant. So let's see what I have to do if I want to buy a house here in Galicia. But first, let's have breakfast. I need to get dressed. I'm heading to A Coruña today because I had a great idea. I pay for private insurance, private health insurance. I know there's public health care here and all that, but I don't know. I pay for private insurance. I feel safer, so to speak, with insurance, and I hardly ever use it. So I said, well, I'm going to take advantage of it. I'm going to use my insurance to go get my teeth checked because I haven't gone in about 2 years. I have a bit of pain here, like something in a molar, maybe a cavity, not sure. I had the great idea to go to the dentist today, even though I'm terrified of doctors and dentists. But well, from time to time you have to be a little brave. I wish my mom could come, but I have to go alone. I'm already used to doing things by myself. It's a fear I think I've already overcome, so let's go. Now I'm in a clothing store, done with my appointment. Honestly, I didn't do much since the doctor who was supposed to see me wasn't there, so someone else was going to see me. I ended up rescheduling the appointment for another day. I'll share more later. And I'm here in a store now that I came to look at clothes. But if I plan to buy a house in Spain, I can't waste money. On other things, I can't buy so many things I don't need, so I'd better leave because I really don't need clothes. If I have the plan to buy myself a house, it's better to start saving from now. So I'm leaving the store and well, step number 1, I'm already here at the mall. Well, in the end, I didn't buy anything. Step number 1 is to see the savings you have. I mean, when you're going to buy a house, you need to know if you're going to buy it outright or with a mortgage. Normally, the bank lends you 80% of the value of the house. If you meet certain conditions, they can lend you between 80% and 90%. And I think it's a very good option for young people who might not have all the money to buy a house. It's difficult these days, you know. One thing to do is visit different banks to compare their offers since each has its own conditions. They have different things. Like you can check to see what benefits you the most, like the installments, like the taxes. And well, I think one of the important steps is to see which bank you're going to choose. And well, of course, also which floor and house will you choose? Because you would obviously ask the bank for 80% of the value of that house, right? Apartment, if you're buying one of, I don't know, let's say 100,000 euros, you have to go to the bank already saying, no, I want you to lend me 80%. So that would be 80,000 euros. So then, and you would have to have 20,000, I guess. So that's it. I think the first step to buying a house in Spain would be to carefully check your savings and see what you can afford. Based on your savings, start exploring options. Where can you find apartments and what price range can you afford? Pay, because obviously with little savings you can't buy an 800,000 euro mansion. You need to find something within your budget, so that's my first step when I'm able to buy the apartment. Okay, that's also a very important step. It's knowing which apartment you're going to buy, where you're going to buy it, what your price range is according to your savings and all that. How do you look for an apartment? Let's see how it's done. From what they told me, it's actually pretty easy. You go to your computer and, for example, in my case, I would stay here in Galicia, so I would search for apartments for sale in Galicia. And of course, it will show up here for you, Idealista and several portfolios, which are like places where people list apartments. Apartments and flats in Galicia, wow, it says there are 8,000 apartments and flats. All of Galicia is selected here and we're going to select buy. We're going to set a minimum price of 60,000 and a maximum of 100,000. I can't buy $1 million house either. Okay, look. Apartment in Carbalera, Orense, 80,000 euros. These are small towns or villas, I think. Apartment in Tomino. Oh, I visited that town. An apartment in Betanzos for 90,000 penthouse on Acaroada Street, Cambry. It's a small penthouse, 90,000. Oh, but look how pretty. But this looks like a little village, you know? Is it like a village? I love penthouses. They're small, practical, and cute. I'd be so happy living in one. I love that little thing, like that little window. Apartment in Minho, apartment in Carvalho. Now let's go a little closer to the area where I live, because I live in Carvalho. Let's search in Carvalho and its surroundings. Let's see the listings. Let's see what we find. Here we are in Carvalho already. An apartment for 88,000, another apartment. This is in Corestanco, which is a small town next to Carvalho. An apartment on Fomento Street. It's pretty good. 3 bedrooms, 80,000, 3 bedrooms, 145 square meters, apartment on Verdillo Street. Well, there are quite a few. This is roughly the range I use as an example since I don't know it. I think there's nothing for less than 50,000 unless it's a house. Let's check out the houses. This one's a chalet. Listed at 85,000 euros, but well, it's pretty destroyed. That's the bad thing. When you find big houses at cheap prices, you often end up spending a lot on renovations. This chalet costs 63,000, but it needs significant investment. Still, you get an idea of local prices. This is the first time I've seriously looked at houses and apartments, though I used to check them out occasionally. Since I hadn't planned or considered making a video about this topic, I hadn't really looked into it. And I'm surprised that here in the towns, in the villages, the prices are actually quite affordable. In a village, you might find a house that needs to be rebuilt from scratch. Like a Cuban friend of mine who bought a little house in a village near Carvalho. She had to rebuild it almost from scratch since it was destroyed and needed renovation, which cost more money. So I think something that would interest me would be an apartment because it already comes fixed up, an apartment that has things inside so you don't have to renovate so much. It would be easier and more practical for me if I'm interested. And another thing is also going to real estate agencies. And well, let's go out to the street now. Another option is to visit a real estate agency to look for apartments. In the place where you live, there are quite a few because you'll see several places that have this outside, which are like signs for houses or apartments for sale, even for rent. So if you don't pay attention on an app or contacting directly the person who's gonna sell you the house, I don't know. For example, I would feel a little, maybe embarrassed because I don't know how to talk. I would contact the real estate agency. Honestly, because they take care of everything. I think the whole process is handled by them, the buying and selling. Of course, you have to pay for it, but well, here you can see other options. Let's see the options they have here in Carvalho for sales. Here's a super cheap one. I mean, for 49,000 in Carvalho, but it's a house. But well, you have to look closely at the pictures because it's pretty destroyed. Houses around here, I mean, it costs $1 million. Oh my god, look, 140,000. An apartment is pretty nice. And you can also go to the banks because there are banks that have apartments that are apartments. I think that here there is one, if I'm not mistaken, these are apartments that have been taken from people who haven't paid their mortgages or something like that. If you don't pay, they take your apartment, right? And then those banks have those apartments, I think, and you can also go to some banks and ask them which apartments they have for sale. I don't know what... I can do that too. Let's see what happens. Or, as you know, check the apps or contact them directly. Go see the apartment in person. Of course you have to do that. Go see the apartment in person to see how it is. Look, there are more real estate agencies here. I'm going to check from outside to see how the houses are. Here's another one. Look, they're 64,000, but honestly, these are houses that need to be renovated right from the start. At 79, 1,999. Wow, close to the beach is really great, huh? Oh my goodness. And well, I think those are good options. I don't know, because you also have to consider the budget you have. If you want something under 100,000 or if you can afford more than 100,000. But let me tell you something, there are some really cheap things. I think you'll never find them in a city. I think you'll never find prices like that in a city. To find cheaper options, always visit a small town. It's just how it is. But what's the downside of a village? Even if I have a house there, it's not a bad idea, but I don't have a car. Living in a village requires a car since it's far from everything. You don't even have a supermarket nearby, so it's more complicated. And living alone in a village and in the middle of nowhere, it makes me a little uneasy too. Did you see these cheap prices? These are usually in small towns. Now, what happens in the city? We're in the city center of A Coruña in Ciudad Vieja. Let's see what the apartments look like here and roughly what prices they have to buy. I imagine it's much more expensive. Well, actually, this area is the most expensive, I think, to buy here in the city of Coruña. Let's browse Idealista for a bit. Let's check local prices and see which apartments are for sale and their appearance. Because apartments in a small town are very different from those in the city, both aesthetically and in terms of price. Prices differ widely, and this area is the city's most expensive. Let's check out the prices option here. I opened Idealistas here in this area so you can see the prices. There are a few that are quite affordable, but they're very, very small. But in general, the prices are higher. Here in Coruña, there are even apartments worth millions, 2 million, 3 million euros. Extremely expensive apartments. One of the most expensive apartments in Galicia is here. And the cost of living here has gone up quite a bit. Besides, it's an amazing city with more opportunities than in other places. Now I wonder, what happens if you already have the apartment you want? This is a topic that you really need to have organized, and you have to be very careful about how you handle it. Now you want an apartment and apply for a mortgage, but they won't give it to you. And you've already talked to the landlord, to the owner of the apartment, so what happens then? Or they give you a mortgage, but then the landlord doesn't want to sell? It's complicated, but that's what I get. I mean, looking here on the internet, it says that when you've already found a house you want, you usually sign a reservation and pay a small amount in advance. I'm not sure of the exact amount. That's something you and the seller decide. You'll need to wait for your mortgage approval. This is in case you apply for a mortgage, which is what people usually do in general. Because yeah, can you imagine someone with... Well, yes, it could be someone who has all that money to buy a house, but generally, like me, I think that's what people do. Well, what about older people? Here, people of all ages get mortgages to buy houses. So it's used so that the owner takes the house off the market and doesn't sell it to someone else while they prepare the more serious contract. Also, check if your agreement with the homeowner refunds your money if you don't get the mortgage. Because it can happen that you don't get the mortgage, so what happens in that situation? Well, nothing. You just have to apply for a mortgage at another bank. See if they can return the deposit you previously paid. Then there's the earnest money contract. I had no idea about these kinds of things. I'm learning now, researching, because now that I'm a little interested in this topic, I'm looking into how to do it step by step. What is an earnest money contract? This is a more serious matter. Well, here you sign a document where you usually give 10% of the price of the house as a deposit. The earnest money contract states if you back out, you lose the money, but if the seller backs out, they must return double. I don't understand this. This contract says the price, what is included, storage room, garage, furniture, everything, and the latest date to sign at the notary. Oh, is this really how it's done? It seems complicated. Online advice suggests making it conditional on my mortgage approval when doing that. That way you don't lose your money if the bank says no. Now, what's next? Once your mortgage is approved, they tell you, yes, the bank tells you, go ahead, we're going to lend you this money so you can buy your home. And what do you need to do? After the deposit, request a home appraisal, which costs about 300 euros. This appraisal tells you the price of the home, more or less. For example, if the owner is selling you the home for 100,000 euros, the appraisal shows the home's market value. I think it should be higher, but that's just my opinion. So the bank decides your loan amount. I think it must be like the lower value between those, the lower value between the price or the appraisal. If the appraisal comes in lower and they set a higher price, I think the bank only lends you the smaller amount of those two prices, So a higher appraisal benefits you. Then they give you the Federal Employer Identification Number, a European standardized information sheet. This is like the official mortgage offer. You must sign all those papers, and by law, the bank has to provide all documents 10 days before signing. Before signing the purchase. And you can also go to the notary, which it says here is free, so they can explain everything to you and you can feel at ease because a notary will explain everything to you clearly. How is it? I assume this is so you have no doubts when getting a mortgage. How does the process work when buying a house? Oh my god, I didn't know there was so much paperwork. I started looking into this topic and I'm already getting stressed out and I haven't even thought about that yet. The big day that would come. At closing, you sign the deeds, purchase agreement, and any mortgage paperwork. The bank is going to put that money in your account for just a few minutes and then that money will disappear because you have to pay. The notary gives you the copy and then goes to the property registry, and that's when the house will officially be in your name. I didn't know about this topic. It's about taxes. What taxes do you pay? You don't just pay the house price, right? You have to pay significant taxes afterward. What taxes apply and how much? For new houses, you pay value-added tax. That's an extra 10% plus taxes on legal documents, depending on the autonomous community. It depends on the autonomous community. Each has its own benefits, laws, and advantages that may or may not help you. This really depends on the autonomous community. Let me check how it works in Galicia. If the house is second-hand, you pay the property transfer tax, which is the property transfer tax, which, for example, in Galicia is 8%. It can go down to 7% or even 3%. This tax, which is 8%, can go down to 3%. You'll pay much less if you're under 36 and it's your main residence. That's not all, honey. There are many more expenses and things. We're not stopping. This is more complicated than I thought, and I'll keep saying it. In addition to these taxes, we must pay for the notary and agency. If you have a mortgage, you must buy mandatory home insurance, usually offered by the bank. Let's see what offers they have. Well, roughly estimate between 10% and 20% of the value of the property. And this is what you'll pay in taxes on top of everything else, on top of everything you have to pay. Also, I think it's not something that's impossible. First, have savings. Second, stay organized and understand everything, as there are many steps. Me, coming from Cuba, I never in my life thought I would ever think about these things. Now I wonder why. Yes, we're adults growing up. You need to think about buying your own house, your own car, and similar things. You need to stay informed, know what to do at each step, and understand how countries and compound investors work. How do they work? There's Phoebe listening to my whole speech, looking at me wondering, what is this human talking about? I love it because she gets between the two pillows and just looks at me while I record. Well, I hope you liked this video and that it was interesting for you, just like it was interesting for me to learn all of this here. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and all those things that are super important. We're reaching 500,000 followers. I've told you before, we haven't reached it yet. If you're watching and not subscribed, hit the red subscribe button. I'm looking into your eyes. It's completely free and won't cost you anything. That way we can reach 500,000, which has been a real challenge for me. Sending a kiss. See you next Sunday with a new video. Share your thoughts and advice in the comments below. I read and appreciate your opinions and am grateful you're here. Sending a little kiss. Bye.